What is up, Janksters? It's your boy Graham, also known as hocks42 on the internet, and today we have an edition of the Overthinking MTG podcast, where we're going to be taking a look at one individual card from March of the Machine. This is one of the battles, one of the sieges, called the Invasion of Segovia. Now, the Invasion of Segovia, the artwork on it is a little interesting. It looks different than anything that I would have expected to see, because prior to this set coming out and prior to this card, I was unaware of what the heck Segovia was. So, doing a little bit of research for this video, I did learn that Segovia is a plane that was actually referenced in very early Magic. Like a lot of the older sets had like subtle references to Segovia, including actually a creature called the Segovian Leviathan that was printed in Legends. Which, I mean, old school, baby. This is like, you know, this is a deep cut in Magic lore. So cool. And the Segovian Leviathan, which is apparently like one of the largest creatures on the entire plane, as you can see here, is a 3/3. With Island Walk for 5. So we've come a long way. It's not just power creep, like in general, like old school Magic design looks very different. But you'll see this gigantic creature, which is dwarfing a whale in the artwork, is only a 3/3. And that might seem weird. And that's not just a factor of old school Magic being different than current Magic. It's not like 3/3s back then were all massive. I mean, yeah, you know, a 3/3 nowadays is cheaper than they were back in the day, but big creatures generally were still huge, right? I mean, this was around the same time as like Kraken and stuff was coming out, which were gigantic creatures. So, or Leviathan or Polar Kraken, that's what I'm thinking of. In any event, but so the Segovian Leviathan only being a 3/3, believe it or not, that is an intentional decision. And the reason for that is because on Segovia, the plane itself, all the creatures and all the buildings and settings and everything, the entire plane exists in miniature. All the things there are really freaking small. That is just exactly how it works. And we see that in the Invasion of Segovia artwork. What we have here is we have a ton of sea monsters, like sea serpents, which we generally associate as being very large, imposing creatures. In this case, swimming around, investigating what is a Phyrexian foot. It's just a foot that is underwater. Like, it looks like it looks like there's a Phyrexian wading through what appears to be relatively shallow water. And we have, you know, and the foot is gigantic compared to the sea creatures. So, cool. So, on Segovia, everything exists in miniature, so that's what we see here. Apparently, the Phyrexians don't shrink down. Meanwhile, any planeswalkers who visit Segovia apparently do shrink down. And when I say shrink down, I mean, it apparently exists at like around 1/100th scale. So these things are very small. Like, they just are. Everything on Segovia is tiny. And apparently Phyrexians aren't, though. I don't understand how that works, but it's Magic, so yay. So the card itself, the Invasion of Segovia. For 2 and a blue, you get a 4 defense battle siege. When Invasion of Segovia enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 blue Kraken creature tokens with trample. Kraken is a creature type that's usually associated with giant creatures, and in this case, you only get 1/1s. Flavorfully, on the nose, I love it. It's really, really cool. And then, the flip side, if we do a little flippy floppy, we get Katis, Sea Tyrant of Segovia. This is a 3/3 legendary serpent, and it has the ability, non-creature spells you cast have Convoke, which means you can tap creatures to help pay for its mana cost. So that's pretty darn cool. For each creature you tap, it pays for 1 mana of either generic or colorless, or the color of the creature tapped, however you want to pay for it. So that's pretty cool. And at the beginning of your end step, untap up to 4 target creatures. So you're untapping 4 creatures on your end step. That's a big deal. So 4 things have like pseudo vigilance, and they can help you pay for the convoke costs of other spells. And on top of that, this battle, when it ETB'd, gave you 2 creatures in addition to everything else going on. And when it flips, Katis itself is a creature. So in this case, when you get kind of this like 3/3 blue mana dork for non-creature spells, that turns all of your creatures into mana dorks for non-creature spells. That's actually a pretty powerful effect. Like, I genuinely like that. I think in any kind of deck where you're going to be going wide with blue, this actually could be good. But at the same time, it's kind of in this weird zone where you want to have a lot of creatures, but you also want to have a lot of non-creature spells in order to take advantage of the Convoke. So non-creature spells you have Convoke is such a weird mechanic, so you need a healthy balance of creatures and spells in order to take advantage of it. And we've seen cards in the past that try to leverage things like this not quite work. Like the one I'm thinking of right off the dome is Sorcerer class from Adventures in the Forgotten Realms that had a very similar ability that allowed your creatures to tap for mana to cast non-creature spells, which in theory can be very powerful. But in order to really make it work, the best way to do it is to use non-creature spells that generate tokens. But a lot of those aren't competitively costed, with a couple of exceptions. Like Burn on the House comes to mind, is a pretty good one that's, pretty decent most of the time. But that's kind of the exception, not the rule. So there are a handful of others, of course. And that's what I would recommend leveraging with Katis. And if you're in that kind of situation, I would imagine like a Bant token strategy could take advantage of this in pretty good way, in pretty good effect. Because those decks also might be running things like Rabble Rousing or Anointed Procession that have, otherwise that are non-creature spells that help boost token generation and whatnot. So, okay, like I think that this card actually is not bad. I think Kaitis is interesting, but it's very interesting in like a casual commander kind of way. I would be very surprised if this sees meaningful competitive play in formats like Standard or Explorer, where they're kind of, I don't know, it seems like it fits at a weird spot in the curve at 3 mana. And the fact that the battle has 4 defense, it has 4 defense counters on it, meaning that you need to be able to crack in and really bust it, effectively or quickly to get Kaitis online. I don't know, like 4 power, 4 damage is a lot. And if you're in a tempo strategy, so in blue tempo, what you want to be doing is you want to effectively kill your opponent before they have an opportunity to set up their game plan. And in order to do that, you use a lot of cheap counter spells and a lot of cheap protection spells, and 2 to 3 power creatures. Like Delver of Secrets is the best at this, like historically anyway. It's like kind of the poster child for tempo, because it gives you 3 evasive power. So it puts your opponent on a very real clock for the low price of 1 mana. And then you fill your deck up with counter spells and interaction so that your opponents can't effectively kill your Delver while it's beating them to death, and they don't get a chance to set up their game plan because you have mana up for counter spells. And you're doing 1-for-1 removal, and you kill them before they get a chance to set up the game plan. Well, the problem with Invasion of Segovia is in order to make that work in like a tempo setting, you have to divert 4 damage away from the opponent and onto Invasion, which is also in a really weird spot, specifically with Delver, because it's a 3 power attacker. So it takes 2 swings from Delver to break the Invasion of Segovia. So I think like tempo, this is a terrible tempo card, honestly. And the only reason I mention that is because right now, that's one of the situations in which blue is very powerful in Standard specifically. And like it doesn't fit that deck at all. And I think decks like Grixis that also have blue in them are really just leveraging blue for a little bit of counter magic. And something like this, it's too many hoops to jump through to get to the final payoff. And the payoff is secondary to what that deck is trying to do. And so I don't see any competitive fits for this card in the other formats, but it's an interesting design. It's a cool look at a plane that we haven't otherwise seen in a very long time, that honestly I was completely unaware of prior to this card. Also, one of the reasons that I'm talking about it here is because as of this recording on March 31st, Wizards of the Coast on their official Twitter made a very interesting joke as it relates to this card. And I would like to share it with you and immortalize this in YouTube history, because oh my goodness, this actually happened. So, on their official Twitter account, at Wizards_Magic, they said, "We have collected feedback over the past few months and discovered an ongoing request to be stepped on. As such, we feel it is opportune to remind you all of the ideal step-on plane, Segovia." Wizards of the Coast made a kink joke on Twitter because of this card. That happened. And honestly, I kind of love it because content creators have been making these styles of jokes for a long time. Now, and by the way, the reason that I'm not mad at this is because I don't feel like they're kink shaming anyone. They're jumping on board for a meme and a joke that has been going around on social media already. So it may be in poor taste for a company of this, you know, with this prestige to go there, because they're skirting with some pretty racy topics, and this is a family-friendly game. So, okay, that's a thing. But honestly, like, the tweet itself doesn't overtly say anything inappropriate. It references something, and the various horny bat memes in the responses to this tweet are pretty funny, I'm not gonna lie. I think it's funny. I respect Wizards for being willing to take this shot. I don't know if the shareholders are super jazzed that they did this, but at the end of the day, here it is. And I mean, yeah, in a plane where everything is 1/100th the size that it would be on our plane, yeah, you can step on a lot of that plane really easily. So, yep, you're not wrong, Wizards. You're not wrong. Anyway, thank you so much for checking out the show. I appreciate it. This is a little tangent from my normal overthinking action. But if you enjoy this, please like and subscribe if you're on the YouTube, or follow on your podcast app of choice, whatever they call it in that app, whether that's subscribing or following or... Anyway, thank you so much. I appreciate you, and I'll catch you on the next one.